Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm very excited tonight. If you watched Saved by the Bell for many years, you love this guy. He was the lovable character, Mr. Dewey, but he's been in a million things, and we're going to discuss them all tonight. It is my honor to introduce to you the one and only Patrick Thomas O'Brien. And Patrick, I want to thank you for coming on today. I'm really excited.
Well, me too.
So, Patrick,
where are you recording from? Where?
I'm in Derby, Connecticut. So
Derby, Connecticut. Okay.
Yeah, it's Connecticut. Not a lot of people. You're probably not familiar with Derby, but it's a small town. But
I'm not. I'm not familiar.
Yeah. So anyway, Patrick, first thing I want to ask you is, how did the love for acting begin for you? How old would you say you were when you got that acting, bug?
Probably being an altar boy. Fifth grade. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell that story. How did what inspired you?
The fear of hell, I guess, back in the day. I thought of being an altar boy was a step closer to the pearly gates. So fifth grade, I jumped right in. Yeah, learned the Latin back then, and being an altar boy, you have all the trappings of the theater. You've got costume and lines and blocking and an audience, the star of the show, the priest, the almighty reviewer up above.
Yeah.
But I've left that all behind. With a name like Kenichi, you might have some Catholic blood in you, huh?
Oh, I'm Catholic. Yes, I am. Yeah. So let me ask you, though, were there any shows, any actors that stood out to you as a kid that you really gravitated towards that you liked growing up?
Not really. Not that young, but as I got older, I don't know, I suppose. The biggies, De Niro and I'm so bad with names, but most of the guys whose roles I couldn't do, like De Niro, But, although, TV like Don Knotts, and he was. I always thought, I could do that, and I pretty much did do a lot of Don Knotts type of roles. And I did meet him. He was in Pleasantville. You remember that movie?
Oh yeah, and you talk about him. What a tremendous actor! You talk about two iconic characters he played in. Barney Fife and Ralph Furley. Those were two of the best. And he was just so gifted as an actor and a comedian. Yeah. So let me ask you. I always wonder about this, Patrick. There's always that foot in the door that you got to get your big break. Sometimes you got to do different things, commercials, sometimes some voiceover work and stuff like that. So, did it happen by accident where you got like your first big break, or did you have to do like small roles in the beginning? How did it all come about?
Oh yeah, I did a lot of small roles, a lot of theater, traveling around from, I'm from small town Wisconsin. So I did the Minneapolis market for a little while, and this theater group in Iowa. I was with them for a year. And, but yeah, there was a big break. I was living in Minneapolis, and I went to New York to visit a college friend. I kind of discovered her. She was a piano player, and she went on to play on Broadway and conducted, and went out to visit. And she was playing the piano for the Pirates of Penzance on Broadway. And she said, the public theater's having auditions for Midsummer Night's Dream. Why don't you go down and audition? I don't know what the hell. And I did, and then went back to Minneapolis, and like a month later, they called, and somebody wasn't working out in the cast. So they offered me the role, and I went out, and it was a show with William Hurt and Christine Baranski, and got an agent then in New York, and started getting, like you said, commercial work, and kind of took off from there. So it was a break that I wasn't prepared for. But
right. And I don't think people realize, Patrick, how important commercial work is, because in a lot of ways, it could be some commercials that really somebody takes notice, and it kind of leads to bigger things. And you got to be able to, as an actor, as anybody that's looking to be in this business, you got to be willing to sacrifice. So even though like maybe commercials wasn't your number one goal, they definitely helped you along the way, I would imagine.
If not exposure, which, yeah, that doesn't hurt, but just paying the bills. I mean, when you're doing theater, and going from job to job and sometimes from town to town, just trying to get work, you're just scraping by. But with that paychecks from commercial work, you can relax a little bit and pick and choose where you want to be. So, yeah, it's I did a lot of commercials. Not so much anymore, but
right.
And some of them were really fun. I mean, I worked with some big names in commercials. A lot of sports figures. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, John Stockton. Who else? KJ.
Kevin Garnett.
No, KJ. Hey, with Kevin Johnson.
Oh, Kevin Johnson from
Phoenix.
But
Suns. Yeah, he got hurt early in his career. But Tiger Woods, I did a commercial with Tiger, and
wow.
Yeah. So
now let me ask.
Commercials can be a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
Right. And I thought about this being originally from Wisconsin. I mean, were you a big sports fan? Because you talk about sports there. I mean, it starts with the Packers. I mean, the Milwaukee Brewers. I mean, were you a big fan of sports growing up?
The Packers, yeah. But then when maybe you don't even remember the Milwaukee Braves, when they moved to Atlanta, that broke my heart. And I never liked the Brewers much because of that. So I became a Twins fan because I was just 90 miles east of the Twin Cities where I grew up, and we were more in the market anyway, of the Twin Cities. So yeah, we got a lot of the Twins games. So that was an easy transition to make. But yeah, still sort of a Packer fan, but not too happy with Aaron.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to go to the Jets. I mean, all signs point to that, so that should be interesting.
Really? I hadn't heard that. Really?
Yeah, I guess they're talking. I mean, they've been talking the last couple of days, and I guess on the Jets front, they're very optimistic they're going to get him. So
yeah,
which is
I've got the Twins hat on. That's
hey, as a kid growing up, I mean, when I was a young kid, I loved baseball. And I mean, I remember that 87 Twins team. I mean, with Frank Viola, Kirby Puckett, Kent Hrbek, Gary Gaetti. I mean, Danny Gladden. I mean, that was quite the Jeff Reardon. That was a great, great Twins team. I mean, so they had a lot of history.
87 and 91. Yeah.
Yeah, 91. Yep. I mean, that was a big year. Jack Morris. I mean, he pitched the game of his life. So, those. Listen, I have nothing against the Twins. I mean, I'm a Yankees fan. There's really no rival there, and I loved Kirby Puckett. I mean,
no rivalry there. God, you kick our asses so much.
It's about the only team we beat nowadays in the playoffs, because when we play Houston, we fold. But that's for another conversation.
The Twins have lost something like, I think it's 18 or 19 straight playoff games.
Yeah.
They have not won a playoff game for 18 and half of them, if not more than half, are losses to the Yankees, it seems. So,
I didn't think
I lived in New York for a while, but Yankee Stadium, it's a great place to watch a game. Such a different atmosphere.
Especially. Yeah.
I mean, in around here, even in Los Angeles, you go to a game and it's a lot of families. And in New York, it's almost just guys,
Yeah.
I mean, just the sound of the crowd is so different. And
it is
it's
special.
pretty cool.
I mean, it really is. And I mean, baseball, I like the other sports, but baseball to me is always the number one. And that's the one I really love the most. So,
yeah,
it was just great. And it's, you talked about theater. A lot of actors I talk to, a lot of them will say they love the theater work more than the actual TV work. I mean, which one did you like more? I mean, did you love being on stage a lot?
Yeah, that was always number one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talk about some of the things you did on theater. I mean, what type of plays did you perform in that we probably don't know about?
All kinds. I mean, yeah. Oddly enough, I'd never done much Shakespeare, but then that first break out in New York with Shakespeare, and then I was just getting New Jersey Shakespeare Festival and the Arena stage in Washington D.C., and then when we went out to Los Angeles, I was getting a lot of Shakespeare too. But uh, which I didn't study, and I don't like Shakespeare that much. But yeah, I was getting cast. I was getting in with these Shakespeare groups, and so yeah, I did a lot of that. But always the comic roles, of course.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, Patrick, because one movie I remember you in, it was the first time I really noticed you. It was in a movie called the UHF, I believe, with Weird Al Yankovic. And I mean,
He
you didn't have a,
noticed me in that. Come on,
yes,
I'm on
yeah,
there for maybe 3 seconds.
right. But that's what I mean about you is you always, even when you did like small things, less was always more with you because you always kind of, you know, made an impression in everything you did. But just talk about, I know you didn't have a lot of scenes in that movie, but just talk about working with Weird Al and working in that movie because that was a big, he had done a lot of stuff, but that was his first big movie that he did.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
and
so talk about that a
Michael
little bit.
Michael Richards, his breakout role.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. There's not that much to tell. Hey, come on! It was literally 3 seconds on
Yeah, it was
screen.
quick. I mean, it was, but I mean, I remember like, we're going to get to Saved by the Bell, but I remember when I saw you, I think maybe on an episode of The Wonder Years first, I said, oh, it's that, so and
That
so. And
it's
I
that
mean,
guy.
yes, but let me ask you though.
Well, one thing though about Weird Al or UHF, because that comes up, that has a cult following, and it
Yeah,
comes up
yeah.
on the media, Facebook or whatever, and I'll always put a little comment in there. Yeah, Weird Al once threw a glass of water in my face, and then people will always respond, "Wow, well, how'd that happen?" And then I put the little GIF, the meme on there, and that kind of explains it. But
Right. But I think about this, Patrick, that even though you didn't really have a big part in that movie, whenever you can work with somebody who's famous, and he has been really big over the last 5 years at that point,
yeah,
whenever you could work in a movie and with a guy like that, it's a great start and it can only lead to more and more big things. So I mean, that movie was important, even though you didn't have many scenes in it, you had to accept it because I mean, when you get an opportunity like that, you have to do it.
well, I never turned down anything really. I always told my agent, it doesn't matter how small a part it is, just keep me working. So
One of
yeah,
the things I always see from actors, actresses, and I mean yourself included, and I mean again, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but everybody just seems so flawless in what they do, and you were like that too. I mean, were you ever nervous when you were doing something, or couldn't you not? You don't think about that. You just have to go out there and do it, and not, you know, concern yourself with if you mess something up or anything.
no, I mean I always studied hard. I mean, even going in for auditions, I'd want to get the script and memorize it, the night before. And but I tell you, it's harder getting older. I mean, it's harder to get those lines in. And yeah, when I did the reboot of Saved by the Bell, I was screwing up quite a bit actually. They didn't get the script to me in time, and they made a couple of changes, and yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. But I really got it done anyway. But took a few more takes than what it should have taken.
Right. Now, another show that I saw you in, I would say maybe two or three episodes at least, was a show that I loved called Night Court. And I mean, you guest starred on there, I would say at least two times, maybe more. Talk
Just
about,
twice.
yeah, talk about being on that show because I mean, again, pop, and that's the thing about character actors, which I think is so important, is whenever they guest star on something and they have to play a certain part, they're so important to that episode, and that's how you always were throughout your career. Just talk about working on a popular show like that because that had to be a lot of fun in the short term for you.
And yeah, that one was kind of special because that was one of the first jobs I got in LA, not maybe the second or third. And it was a big part.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my agent was quite happy. Yeah, he was quite thrilled that I'd gotten yeah, that was a big guest starring role. So yeah, that was pretty exciting to get that. And yeah, they had done the show for quite a while, so they had their routines on the set. They had these games that they would play, kind of word games, and that the regular cast would do. So I don't know. I tend to just hang out in my dressing room anyway. I don't hobnob that much, but
Yeah.
so yeah, they were good people. And Larry Kett, he was a good guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
and all my
Yeah.
scenes were with him. It was tethered to him with the handcuffs there. So yeah,
I just think that show is like, nothing better on a Thursday night than watching, getting yourself ready for Friday to come. You're watching that show 9 o'clock at night, whatever it was on. I believe it was 9 o'clock. And you just everybody on that show was so funny. I mean, it was just a
yeah.
real good show. I mean, a great writing. And I mean, I just think that that's something we miss in TV a little bit, because to me, you just can't compare TV like in the 80s and 90s. I thought it was just off the charts.
Maybe, actually, I wasn't watching that much TV back then in the 80s and
Yeah.
90s, but we had uh, we had kids, so we were watching a lot of kid shows, and I wasn't paying that much attention to the business, although even though I was out there in LA. And that's especially true of Saved by the Bell. I just wasn't paying attention.
Right.
I never thought it would still be a thing,
Yeah.
40 years later, but I wish I had been paying more attention to it when I did it. But
Right. And speaking of which, I was going to get to that, and I'll get to it now. I mean, that was something that was very innovative by the whoever came up with it, whether it was Peter or whether it was NBC. But they tried a show, I think it was on Disney, and it was called Good Morning Miss Bliss.
yeah,
And it didn't really, you know, they had it on at nighttime, I believe, and it just really didn't take with the audience. But they were clever enough to realize that there was something with these kids, and they decided to turn it into Saved by the Bell, and to have it Saturday mornings, which was unheard of, because Saturday mornings were Bugs Bunny, they were, Daffy Duck, all that stuff. I mean, it wasn't really sitcoms or anything like that. So I thought that was really ingenious by whoever came up with that. Talk about that a little bit. Just taking the chance of putting a show like that Saturday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, it was the first sitcom for kids. Yeah, and it didn't do well in the beginning.
Right.
Got kind of lousy reviews, and the ratings weren't good. But the actual, it was. You're right, Peter. He was the
Yeah.
creator of it. The driving force behind it. But the person who really saved it was Brandon Tartikoff,
Right.
president of NBC at the time, because he had a couple of daughters, and they would come around to the set, and they just loved it, and so did their little friends. And Tartikoff said, well, if my daughters and their friends like it, well, it's after the first season, they were going to, they thought that they were going to, can it, but it was his decision to say, no, we're going to keep on. And it took that long for it to take off. I think a whole season before it really grabbed a hold. So it was him.
Yeah, and I just think about this, your character, Mr. Dewey. I mean, he's on that first episode, and right away, I mean, he comes into the class and he goes, "How was your summer? Mine was bad. Uh, I had a toothache," all this stuff that went on. And I mean, your character was just hilarious. I mean, he kind of basically was like, he walked in and he didn't really have a care in the world. His attitude was just to get a paycheck. But in a lot of ways, he was a good influence on those kids, especially the character Screech, because when Screech is having self-esteem issues, he kind of encourages him to step up as the hall monitor. And I really felt like the character Mr. Dewey. And here's something you probably don't realize, Patrick. Your character was on all 3 installments of Saved by the Bell. It was on the original Saved by the Bell, the new class, and then the reboot. And I think you and the 4 actors are the only ones who have been on all 3 installments. So that's a pretty nice thing to have in your cap. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I was flattered when they asked me to get on the reboot because, yeah, you're right. They didn't ask that many people back, and yeah, that was cool. Yeah.
Let me ask you though, was it did you have to kind of learn to play Mr. Dewey all over again, or did you know how to play him enough because you had played him all those years? I mean, again, you've done so many other things that I just feel like it might have taken you, a little time to kind of getting back into the swing of things of that character.
No, you have your bag of tricks and you just pull them out. It's easy. And I had done that character actually before in a play. So basically the same character, not Mr. Dewey, but just the monotone, boring character. But yeah, Dewey wasn't the first time I've done that. So, and wasn't the first, and it won't be the last either, I don't think so.
Right. And I think about this though, Patrick. Everybody wants that, at least in my opinion. They want like to be identified sometimes as that one film or one sitcom or even character. And the thing about you is everybody is always going to kind of associate you with Mr. Dewey, at least Saved by the Bell fans for sure. So, I mean, that's nice for you to have because like you've done so many things, you've done different characters and different shows, but I mean, that character is always going to be remembered for that Saved by the Bell franchise because I mean, he was probably the first teacher that kids saw when they watched that show.
Yeah. Yes. I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a nice thing. I brought up the Wonder Years, Patrick, and I mean, I always thought that was probably the best show on prime time at the time because the writing was phenomenal. It was about a young kid who grew up in 1969, and he's dealing with all the issues that 12-year-old kids deal with, going through the change, junior high, all that stuff. I mean, you were only on, I think, 1 episode, but I mean, just that 1 episode you guest starred. I mean, were you like amazed at how well the writing was for that show?
No. I mean, I know it was. Yeah, it was a big hit, but I didn't watch it, and again, that was a small part too. I mean, mine was more of a sight gag than anything. It was this party, and we played Twister.
Yeah.
And I think I had maybe 1 line, but I had this very large wife, and there was me, and so that was kind of the gag. Just it wasn't a big acting job. It's just show up and.
It's funny about that show. It's funny about that show, though. All the years I watched it, and to this day, people still really don't know where the town was, where it took place. Like, I mean, they never kind of elaborated if it was in California, if it was in, Minnesota, wherever the case might be. Nobody really knew. Now, I don't believe I ever saw snow on that show. So I'm thinking it had to be, a warm place somewhere where they grew up. But it is amazing to me that like you never really knew where the show like what town the show took place in.
I didn't know that. Yeah, usually but
yeah, they kind of, which was good. I mean, and then listen, I mean, some of the other shows you did, Step by Step, Family Matters, and Family Matters is interesting because it is amazing to me how Jaleel White just became the breakout character. I mean, everybody loved that character, Steve Urkel. I mean, you were on that 1 episode. I mean, how fun was doing that show? Because it seemed like to me that show, the cast for the most part really got along with each other well and had a lot of fun.
The feeling that I got, that was soon after he had really taken over the show.
Yeah.
And they had a good show before then.
Yes, they did.
And I think that cast, I got the feeling, and I'd heard, the grapevine, that they were pissed off, because he took he and the writers took the show away from those main characters that were there, long before.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
came in, and yeah, they resented that. I mean, they got ratings, but
yeah,
and kind of, it. I don't know. It was cheap laughs. It was cheap TV. I thought, and they had a more sophisticated show before he came on. Again, I didn't watch the show, but that's just what I heard and kind of observed.
yeah. I mean,
On
I
the
think
set.
I think it kids definitely loved it, and I mean that was what they realized on Friday nights. They had to like you know kind of gear their audience towards kids. I thought in the later seasons, like when he started inventing these machines and he could turn himself into Elvis and all this other stuff, I thought that got a little silly because you still got to remember it's real life, and if
Yeah,
he were making machines like that, he'd be a millionaire, his character anyway. So
yeah.
I thought that stuff was kind of, ridiculous. But I will say this, that I mean, even though the cast resented him, I don't blame him because you're a young kid. You're not going to turn down that opportunity. And I will say that I
Oh,
applaud him for the fact that he did a great job being a
oh
lead
yeah.
character. Yeah.
Maybe I misspoke a little bit there. I don't know if they resented him, but they just resented the way that the show went.
Yeah.
They probably resented the writers or just fate. Like shit.
Right.
We had a good show and we had good parts, and then it kind of went away because of yeah, but well, like you said, because of how funny this guy was. So just them's
Yeah.
the
And
breaks, and that's Hollywood.
unfortunately, that happens a lot in TV. I mean, Ronnie Howard still did a great job on Happy Days, but it was really supposed to be him and Anson Williams, the stars of that show, and then Henry Winkler's character took off, and it became Ronnie Howard and Henry Winkler. So,
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes stuff like that happens by accident, and I mean, the show goes on for a lot of years, but it is unfortunate when you see like because I'm sure for Anson it was a little tough to have to be in a more supporting role after
yeah,
that. Yeah. Another
yeah.
show, Patrick, that
Never happened for me. I never took over a show.
right. Another show, Patrick, that I saw you on a few times was Home Improvement. Now you talk about another popular show. I mean, Tim Allen was tremendous. The boys on that show did a great job. Patricia was tremendous. I mean, talk about just on being on that show for a couple episodes. Was that a lot of fun for you?
He was kind of what's his name? Help me out. God, I'm bad with names.
Tim
Huh?
Allen.
Him, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the friendliest guy, but
Really?
everybody
Yeah.
else was. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
That's about all I remember from that.
yeah. Did you enjoy like aside from him? I mean, did you enjoy the couple episodes you did? I mean, did you like what they had you do in in those episodes?
There was
Or
only one.
one? See, I thought you were in at least two. I could be wrong
Yeah.
though.
There were two married with children's.
Yeah, that was another great show. I mean,
Yeah,
and that show, I always credit that show with putting Fox on the map because that show
yeah,
was really a big reason why Fox got popular, in my
yeah,
opinion. Yeah,
yeah. But that was fun to do,
yeah,
especially the first one. The I mean, the crowd was so into it, and they
yeah,
got into it too much
yeah,
after a while. I kind of got to know Ed O'Neill. I had worked with him on that Dragnet that came and went,
yeah,
and we had a lot of time we had some things in common, and we talked. But yeah, the second episode of that of of Married with Children, he was saying that the audience was so intrusive, with all the oohs and the ahs,
yeah.
and you just couldn't get a rhythm for the show itself and the jokes. They were so that was kind of a negative that he groused about, but that just came later on, I think, in the run. But
Yeah, and the thing is too is I remember at the time Married with Children there was a lot of controversy because they kind of
yeah,
pushed the envelope a lot. But
yeah,
when you look back at it and you watch shows like Two and a Half Men and you know what's the other one The Big Bang Theory and stuff like that, those shows went way over the top with pushing the envelope.
yeah,
So Married with Children, I mean, as crazy as it was at times, it wasn't even close to what those type of shows would do. So it was kind of maybe they were the first, but they definitely weren't the most outlandish, in my opinion.
I want to put a shout out to Christina Applegate. You know, as people ask me who is some of your favorite, you know, stars that you work with, and she was just great. I mean, just so talented, so subtle, and so funny with that character. But really a nice person. She didn't have a big head. I did the little Shakespeare with her too, for this Shakespeare company that I worked with a lot in Los Angeles called Shakespeare Festival LA. And Tom Hanks's wife was on the board of directors. And so every spring they would do a benefit reading. We just read the Shakespeare play. And one year, it was Midsummer Night's Dream, and Tom Hanks was in it, as was his wife. And Christina Applegate was in it. She had one of the big parts. And again, she was just so nice. And then it's a shame that she has, does she have MS, I think, now?
Yeah.
She was just the sweetest person. Yeah.
Yeah, and think about this too. I mean, she did a lot of things after Married with Children. She was able to, you know, do different things. And I mean, you could just tell when you hear her in interviews, she's a real nice person. I think sometimes fans, they get too caught up in people's characters, and they think that's how they really are. And they don't realize that these people are playing a character, and that they are so opposite from the characters they play. I mean, she's a very intelligent person.
Yeah.
I mean, well articulate. And I mean, everybody on that show, when you think about it, did very well after the show ended. I mean, Katie has done, she did Sons of Anarchy, which was a great show. Ed is just, I mean, God, Ed, he's done everything. I mean, so they put Fox on the map, and then they really thrived after that show ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The son didn't do much, did he?
I mean, he's still doing different things. He may not be. Yeah. I mean, I think he does something with producing behind the scenes, but I mean, he's still involved. But those three especially, I mean, they did a lot. I mean, they really have done a lot since the show ended. So they've really been able to, you know, adjust to the change of times. You know, another movie that you were in that people may not remember as much, but you were in the Brady Bunch movie. I think you were one of the auctioneers, or you ran it. I mean, talk about
the auctioneer, I think.
Yeah. So talk about doing that movie, because that had to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was all right. I don't remember that much about it. It was a lot of waiting. I remember they didn't get to us or to my scene until way late in the day, but Michael McKean had the little scene with him.
Yeah. Another great actor.
Yeah. Spinal Tap is one of my favorites. And didn't they get together to do it again, or doing a reboot of it?
I know they discussed it, whether they did it or not, but I'll tell you, that was a great movie. And it's funny. Some people would say to me they didn't think it was funny. And if you don't think it's funny, then you didn't get the movie. So
you didn't grow up in that era then, if you don't think it's funny, because
I mean, it was hysterical. Yeah, it really was. But again, I mean, when that movie came out, I mean, I didn't expect much from it. I didn't think it was going to do well. It actually did very well, that from what I remember. It got good reviews. I mean, they were kids who were still trapped in the 60s trying to live in the 90s. So I found it to just be like, you know, maybe it was corny, but it was funny at the same time if you really paid attention. Yeah. And I mean, that's what I think about your career, Patrick. I mean, you've been in everything. I mean, you've worked with so many different people. I mean, I would say that a guy who's been in doing this for over 40 years, there's really nothing like that you regret. You're satisfied with how your career has went, correct?
Oh yes, it exceeded my expectations. Yeah, when I declared a major in theater, my fourth year, and it took me 6 years to get through college. So I was working part-time jobs. That's why, mind you. But I thought, well, it'll be a hobby. I'm going to have a day job, for the rest of my life. But yeah, so yeah, I did better than I thought I would. So yeah.
Yeah.
I've got regrets, but nothing major. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I mean, you have that character that people are always going to remember you for. I mean, they're always going to say when they talk about Patrick Thomas O'Brien, they're always going to say, uh, known for the role as Mr. Dewey on the popular Saved by the Bell show. So I mean, that's a nice thing to have next to your resume right there, is having that, because again, that everybody on that show, I always said this, whether they were the main cast, they were guest stars, whatever it was, they always kind of played a big part in the success of that show. And I really
Yeah.
believe that no show is going to be successful if it's about school without the teachers that are playing those roles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And, speaking of which, I wanted to bring this up to you because you kind of did, like I said, some scenes with Dustin. I mean, that was really, that really like took me aback. That he died so young. I mean, I think he got lung cancer. You worked with him a little bit. I mean, were you able to keep in touch with him at all over the years?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. He did move to Wisconsin. You heard that.
Yeah.
And got in a little trouble there, but no, I didn't keep in touch with any of them, so
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this.
But interesting, when I moved to Minneapolis, I'd been here for like 6 months, and all of a sudden there was a notice on the website where you look for auditions, and this little gaggle of actors were doing a Saved by the Bell, kind of a loving, but comedic version of. They would just do a few episodes and put the '90s commercials in between, but it was on stage. And the audition notice was they were looking for a Mr. Dewey because their Mr. Dewey had just moved to L.A. and I had just moved to the Twin Cities, so that was. So I showed up at the audition. A lot of drop jaws, and yes, and naturally I got the part. But it was fun, doing it with these. They were fans of the show and big fans of the show. So
yeah, I mean that not many could say that either. I mean, that usually doesn't happen. So I mean, that's again something to really be proud of. I mean, and that's what I always like to, is when sometimes people, when they do certain parts, they don't want to ever go back to them. And I thought it was just great. Like, people got to see an updated version of Mr. Dewey in 2020. I mean, that to me was cool. And it was really disappointing that that show got canceled, because I thought that the show was good. I mean,
yeah,
one thing they did differently than they did with the original show is there were some serious moments in the original one. This was just comedy all the time. When you thought something was going to be serious, it would turn into something funny. So, I mean, they kind of changed it a little bit, and they kind of showed you updated versions of the characters of the past.
yeah,
So I thought it should have been on more. It was a shame Peacock pulled the plug on it.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that is TV, and we know that and stuff like that. But but it was great to see. I think Ed Alonso as well. He came back and he,
Yeah,
reprised his role as the guy Max. So
yeah.
because he kind of disappeared after the second season, you never saw him again.
Well, magic doesn't work that well on TV.
Yeah,
I mean, and the things that he would come up with were kind of clever, but not clever enough to take up that much focus from the show, I think.
yeah.
And
Because he was a main character in the beginning. People
yeah,
probably forget that, but
yeah,
he was a main character. And I mean, the actor himself, he's an outstanding magician. I mean, you
yeah,
look at some of his stuff. So I
yeah.
mean, but let me ask you, Patrick, before we go, what, I know this is a hard question, but what, what has been the most rewarding thing about being an actor that happened for you? If you had to pick one thing, which is probably tough, but what would you say was most rewarding about your career?
The one, God, geez, I don't know. Kind of hard to pick out one thing. I don't know. Number one, when people ask me what my favorite role is, that's easier. Want to go with that? Favorite show?
Sure. I mean, I could kind of guess what it is, but go ahead.
All right, guess.
Mr.
You'll never
Dewey.
guess. You won't guess.
No, it isn't that, huh?
What?
Mr. Dewey. I mean, that's what I was thinking would be your
No, I was
favorite.
going to say I was a drowning victim on Baywatch, getting
Oh,
mouth to
yes.
mouth by
Yep.
one of the Baywatch babes. So there you go. 19 takes, but who's counting? Yeah, but no, it's kind of my joke when people ask. But
Yeah, but I mean, a great career nonetheless. I mean, again, because here's what I look at when I look at actors, Patrick, is if they're able to keep working, and you've been able to keep doing stuff forever. I mean, you've done films, you've done TV, you've guest starred on stuff, but you've always been in the picture from early 80s to the present 2023. So I mean, that to me says a lot about you as an actor because you've continued to work all these years.
late 80s.
Yeah, late 80s. Yeah,
Late
probably
80s.
like
Yeah.
87, I would think, around
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's, listen, I mean, 36 years in the business, that's pretty impressive. You're almost at the 40-year mark. So I mean,
Yeah.
you got to be proud of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, before we go,
Gosh, shucks.
before we go, what could some of the fans expect to see in going forward? You got any projects coming up within the next few months or anything?
Well, I'm kind of at the ass end of my career, actually. Yeah, moving back to the Twin Cities was a mistake. We my wife and I realized that soon after we moved back here. But I've been doing some theater. I've got this one man show I've been doing for quite a while, like 12 years now, and I've toured that around the nation and Canada in fringe festivals. If you're familiar with fringe festivals,
A little bit, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so that's been a lot of fun, and
Right.
it's a great show. You could look up some pretty damn good reviews online. Underneath the Lintel. It's a lousy title for a really good play. I didn't write it, but it's really good about a kind of an uptight librarian. It fits. I didn't have to work too hard to create that character. So it's yeah, actually I think I'm more proud of that role than any other role I've done. And it's because it's a one man show, and it's a marathon each time I have to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Patrick, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. This was a lot of fun. I've always wanted to interview you, and I mean, it was a real honor for me. And listen, I mean, congratulations on a wonderful career because I mean, like I just said a few minutes ago, you've been working steady since probably 1986, 87. So I really
Yeah.
do applaud you for that. And thank you for giving fans like myself some great memories over the years. I really do appreciate it.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you. Well, there you have it, folks. I mean, you saw him, you probably familiarized him with Saved by the Bell, but I mean, he has done so many things over the years. He's always on TV, no matter what it is. His face pops up all the time. And that's a credit to him and the dedication and commitment he's had to what he's loved to do for all these years. He's one of those great unsung heroes of TV, and it's been a pleasure to watch him throughout the years. Patrick Thomas O'Brien is one of those great people in TV, and we were very fortunate enough to watch him. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi. He's Patrick Thomas O'Brien saying good night, everyone.